Hunting by Stars. Chapter 11. A Slim Light in a Dark World. French. In the morning, I found him sleeping in the chair, his elbow on the arm, his head held up with a palm. Were you really quoting Amazing Grace? He roused, stretching and blinking rapidly. The imprint of his hand was red on his cheek. What? Seeing the doctors in the room, he pulled himself upright quick, smoothing out the front of his shirt, tugging the seam on his pant leg straight. Then he ran both hands through his short hair and used his fists to rub his eyes. You know it was written by a slave trader, Amazing Grace. Someone who literally delivered thousands of people into torture and death. He paused, remembering his story from the night before. Well, a slave trader who later reformed and fought for the well-being of all the people. He opened his hands wide, smiling, more than a little smug. You know that song predicted our time, where we are now? You don't say. I was tired, down to my soul tired. Tired of all this horse shit. I slumped further into the bed till my feet hit the floorboard. The sheet was scratchy on my chin. Mitch stood in front of the chair, cleared his throat, placed a hand over his tie and heart, closed his eyes, and began to sing. The earth shall soon dissolve like snow, the sun forbear to shine, but God who called me here below will be forever mine. Nice pipes, I teased. Thanks, he answered in earnest. He must have forgotten I was his brother, and real compliments would be harder than that to come by. I'm part of the staff choir. I rolled my eyes. Yeah, well, there aren't many opportunities to sing when you're running for your life. He sat back down, playing with the crease down each leg of his gray trousers. French, I'm real sorry about how things went for you. Honestly, if I could take it all back and make sure you went with me, I would. I sat up quick, too quick, and the blood rushed into my head, pushing black spots into my vision. What the hell, man? That was the bravest thing I've ever seen, the bravest thing I've ever even heard of. You saved me. I was actually saved, not pretend gospel saved. He leaned forward, placing a hand on the bed near my arm, when I jerked out of his reach. Easy, easy now. You'll pop your stitches. He looked around the room, smiling at the frowning white coats, watching us suspiciously with their clipboards and magnified eyes. Don't go getting all charged up or you get strapped to the bed. I've seen it happen for less. You've watched a lot of kids being tortured, and you just keep watching, eh? I didn't want to look at him, but I couldn't help it. In between each word, I was searching the planes and curves of his face for the Mitch of my memory, the one I'd held on to all these years. He should have taken me with him, and behind it all was the deep humiliation of being robbed of the reunion I had played out in my head so many nights before sleep, robbed of Mitch. Could I not even have this one moment of relief, of happiness? French, I think you should call me Francis. Francis, he said it as a sigh. He paused. I might not know him anymore, but I knew that taking away my name hurt him. I understand your frustration. I really do. He sat forward on his chair, his hands clasped between his knees. You're at the beginning of a long journey, but I'll be right here by your side. I'd rather you weren't. And it won't take as long as it did for me. We've changed the program, revised the timelines. You could be out of containment in weeks instead of months. You could even be in the field before the year is over. Wait, out of containment? In the field? Now I was truly interested. Like the actual field? He laughed. Yeah, little brother, into an actual field. His face turned serious. But there's no gaming the system. Your dedication has to be real. They'll know if it's not. His eyes got dark. I'll know if it's not. I tried to swallow everything I wanted to say. I longed to both tell him to stop calling me brother and beg him to help me escape, even though it was becoming obvious he would never do that. I couldn't help it, though. Even now, I had a small, bright piece of hope. If he'd been changed once, maybe he could be changed again. What is the program? I had trouble maintaining eye contact. Maybe he really could tell when I was being insincere. When we were little, he always called me on my lies. How do I start? He smiled, small and quick, but it betrayed actual happiness. Leave that to me. The good thing about Mitch not being Mitch was that he seemed to have lost his ability to see my tells, the way I started shifting in the bed, the way I pulled my lips tight. Even Mig knew those. I had to pull myself together to get past the ache in my head and visions of my dead mother and terror for my family, for Rose, Chiboy, Slopper, Cherie, Zigwan, Wob, and Mig. I had to get it all the way together if I was to even have a hope in hell of pulling this off. So I laced my fingers and forced myself to meet his gaze. I had to be even, no sudden changes, nothing he could doubt. I'm not actually interested, you know. I'd rather die than convert. He smiled again, this one more perfunctory than the last. No more reveals for now. I'll do you the favor of not repeating that. He bent down to pick up a black binder he'd left beside the bed. On the front was a small white label that said 656987, 17-year-old Metis, male. That was me. That's all I was right now. But better that the label was on a binder than on a vial of marrow. Okay then, first things first. I'll go talk to the supervisor, and you get some rest so we can get you out of here. He wagged his finger in front of my nose like an old lady, and no more smart mouth. That one cut. Oh man, I wanted to pop him in his jaw. Instead, I just rolled my eyes. He scurried out of the room, binder under his arm. I closed my eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, I ran through the building again and again in my mind, memorizing each corner and counting the doors. It was obvious there were no classrooms. This place was unlike a school as you could get. There was nothing here but medical gear, offices, and indigenous bodies in locked rooms. It was a prison. I had to get out, and now Mitch had given me a small sliver of light to chase. But could I pull it off? Could I convince not only my asshole brother, but the people who pulled his strings that I had turned? I pictured myself in my own nerdy suit with a tie I couldn't stop fidgeting with. I could do that. Then I pictured myself with a binder under my arm, detailing all the specifics of some other poor sap on a bed. I imagined walking past suffering prisoners, whistling Amazing Grace like I hadn't a care in the world. I thought of singing in the staff choir while kids cried for their moms. I couldn't do that, but I had to try to make it look like I could. There was too much at stake. Then I imagined holding Rose's hand, walking over the spongy ground through bright ferns, the sound of water trickling nearby, the way her hair smelled when we had been running hard, and I knew that I could. I could do anything. I would do anything to get back home. I woke up 2 nurses, one checking my pulse, the other sliding the thin curtain along its curved pole so that my bed was surrounded by fabric as the suggestion of privacy. How are you feeling? The one holding my wrist with gentle fingers smiled. It was such a rare and true smile that I suddenly had space to feel okay. Lousy. She released my hand and wrote some numbers on a clipboard, and then placed it on the foot of my bed. Her long braids were held back with an elastic, revealing small gold hoops up each earlobe, all the way to the cartilage. I bet. The second nurse wore pink blush on her dark skin and had kind eyes. She rubbed the metal circle of her stethoscope on her own stomach to warm it up before placing it under my shirt. These small acts of kindness were tearing me apart. I'm May, and this is Alice, and we're here to help. Now, do me a favor and take a deep breath. She filled her own lungs to demonstrate. When she was done listening to my chest, she added data to the clipboard, and they both stood, one shorter, both in pink scrubs, side by side, at the foot of the bed. You get brought in by yourself? May asked. I hesitated. Was this another trick? Another way to pump me for information, only this time with niceties? Maybe they were a part of an underground network that helped natives escape, or maybe they were using the system to catch us before we made the first move. Them being here, now, right after Mitch brought up the program, it just seemed a little too convenient. I had to keep my head on straight, especially now that Mitch had shown me a way out. Yeah, so? They exchanged looks. Alice spoke next. No one's out there waiting for you? Nowhere to run back to? No, I'm alone. I folded my arms over my chest. You can tell Mitch that. I have no intel to give, and I'm all in for the program so he can stop checking. I turned over in my bed and closed my eyes. If this was another test, I intended to pass. I heard the curtain being pulled back, and then I was alone once more. I smothered the small spin of panic and regret in my stomach with a palm pushed against my belly button. Just before dark, the same watchman as before came to collect me. I was put into a wheelchair and strapped down. They were silent as they loaded me up, signed a form on the clipboard held out by a doctor, and took me out into the hall. This time, we took an elevator. When the door slid shut, the larger one, who was pushing the chair, leaned down under his mouth until his mouth was beside my ear. I wish you could run again. I could cut these straps so that you can try. You'd get more than a busted cheek this time. The other man stood in front of us, his back to me. I saw his shoulders bounce as he chuckled. It's like they think they're all great athletes now or something. Too many years spent on their asses, living off the taxpayers. Now all of a sudden they're all Olympians. They both laughed. Yeah, said the big guy. They finally get a chance to provide something to society to pay us back for centuries of free school and special privileges, and they're even trying to get out of that. Typical. I kept my eyes on the lit-up red arrow above the door, trying not to hear them. "You hear me, Niji?" he said it through gritted teeth, gripping the handles of my chair again and shaking it. "Or are you too stupid to understand?" "Ah, leave him." The watchman in front turned his head. "He's pretty much just a Ziploc for what we need. We just got to keep the bag from tearing before it's time to break the seal." Ding. The door slid open, and they went back to their stoic stance. All professional-like. The elevator was on the other side of the guard station, so we had to swipe through the hallway. I used every second of the journey to take in details about the place. The windows were all high up on the walls, so trying to use one to get out would involve finding another way to reach them. The hallways were empty, but the doors were all open. I strained to see in each one, looking for any familiar faces, but there were no people at all. Each room, identical to mine, was empty, the bed made and the light on. There was nothing differentiating one from the next. No posters or knickknacks, no books, or even a clock. A few had a pile of folded clothes at the foot of the bed, mostly pale green, but one or two gray. But they could have belonged to anyone. There was nothing about any room that indicated an individual, and nothing to tell me if I knew any of the people who were kept there. And then I heard a noise I had no real memory of hearing before. A cacophony of voices mixing and weaving, punctuated by laughter and a few small currents of despair. All joined and set loose from throats with abandon. We turned to the main room, and there they were, about 60 people of different ages and sizes, all in white t-shirts and pale green scrubs. All in white t-shirts and pale green scrub pants like me, all indigenous like me. They gathered in small groups around the space. Two boys tossed a red ball back and forth. There was a lively card game happening at one coffee table, and a group of teary old men in serious conversation at the other. Teenagers stopped talking to watch us pass. The general volume lowered as I wheeled through, but there was no moment of silence. I was so happy I could have cried. Here we were, taking up space, filling it with our bodies and with our voices. It was more than I ever could have hoped for in any place, let alone this one. Two men with scraggly mustaches and longer hair lifted their fists in the air as I passed, eyes solemn and connected to mine. The watchman in front flicked his wrist, and the small tube he held snapped into a long rod. He wound up and cracked the guy closest to us in the side of the leg so that he went down on one knee. Still the man maintained eye contact with me, arm bent now, his fist still raised. "Stay strong, brother," someone yelled from the crowd, and a few others sent up a short "ooh" in response. As we left the bright and the noise of the room, I turned my head back to take in every last face I could see. "Morons," the man pushing me sneered. "Fucking idiots," agreed the other, collapsing his rod back to the handle. We traveled the rest of the way in silence. I noticed it was silent because now I knew what the opposite of silence was, just like I knew how light my room was when we entered because it had been dark for so long. "All right, kid, no funny business." They unbuckled my restraints. "Get out." "Can't I go with everyone else?" I climbed out of the chair. "No way, not after that shit you pulled running off. The main room is for better behaved animals." They pulled the chair out into the hall and slammed the door. "Good night," one called through the door. "Good night, but the sun's out," I answered. "No, there's no sun for you," and then the light snapped off. The room had never been more quiet or more dark, so I closed my useless eyes and dreamed of home.